Welcome to a deep dive. We dig through the sources, pull out the key stuff, so you get the insights without all the reading. Basically, a shortcut to getting up to speed.
Hmm.
And today, we're tackling something huge. How we actually connect with other people. How to love, really. We're using insights from How to Love by the late Dr. Gordon Livingston.
That's right. And our goal here is to pull out what Livingston offers on, well, recognizing people who might cause problems.
Yeah,
Spotting those qualities you really want in relationships and maybe cultivating them too, and just understanding how complex it all is. Building real connections.
it's about making smarter calls
Right.
about others and maybe even more importantly about ourselves.
Exactly. Getting better at reading the signs.
Okay, let's unpack this. Livingston, he jumps right in saying that understanding people, their patterns, isn't just like a nice to have for relationships. He thinks it's absolutely crucial.
He really does. He argues that just learning from, trial and error,
Hmm.
it's just too slow. Painfully slow.
And you might make the same mistakes over and over again anyway.
Precisely. He points out, look, life is finite. And honestly, we do tend to fall into repeating patterns, don't we? We're not really taught to look underneath the surface at what drives behavior.
It's like stumbling in the dark. He has that line, we are what we do.
Yes. Simple but powerful, our consistent actions, our habits, that's what defines us to the people around us. Not our intentions, but what we actually do.
And he calls these personality styles, collections of traits.
Right. And the key thing for him is that these styles are often, well, pretty baked in. They tend to be quite resistant to change.
So recognizing them early is vital. It's not about slapping a label on someone forever, but about seeing these predictable ways of behaving that really impact relationships.
Exactly that. Understanding the patterns.
So let's get into it. Who are these people Livingston warns us about? The patterns we should be wary of in our personal lives.
Okay. He walks through several. The first one he highlights is the histrionic personality style. Think the classic drama queen or drama king.
Right. Needs to be the center of attention, like, all the time.
Always. Livingston describes them as often emotionally shallow, maybe a bit unstable.
Yeah.
They focus a lot on appearances, how things look, how they look.
And sometimes that focus on appearance, like conventional beauty or charisma, can be really distracting, right?
Totally. He gives examples like movie stars or super seductive people. That initial dazzle can blind you to the fact that they might be disorganized or,
Yeah,
more
yeah.
critically, lack the ability for real commitment. It's the spotlight they crave, not necessarily deep mutual connection.
Okay, so from needing attention to demanding admiration,
Yeah.
what's next?
That brings us to the narcissistic personality. The absolute core feature here, Livingston says, is this huge sense of self-importance coupled with a really profound lack of empathy.
Oh, yeah. That inability to see things from someone else's perspective. He actually says they're incapable of that vital human characteristic, empathy.
It's dark, isn't it? And you feel it. The conversation, it always comes back to them. Their stories, their successes, they need that constant feeding of admiration.
And they get genuinely upset, like outraged, if you try to set a boundary or expect your needs to matter just as much.
Exactly. Livingston notes, interestingly, that 4 out of 5 tend to be male. He points to maybe politicians as examples where that initial smoothness or those big stories of success can be very, very appealing at first.
Okay, a different kind of pattern now. The borderline personality style. Sounds unstable.
It is. Livingston describes someone with really shaky self-image whose moods can swing wildly very quickly. He talks about their relationship history sometimes being like a wasteland of discarded relationships.
Whoa, that's heavy.
It is. It's this push-pull dynamic, right? Intense neediness, almost clinging one moment, and then maybe sudden anger or manipulation the next. They often battle deep self-loathing.
And their unpredictability. It must push people away sometimes.
It often does, which tragically just confirms their deepest fear, the fear of being abandoned. He also mentions how challenging this instability can be if they become parents.
All right, moving into even more concerning territory. The sociopathic personality.
Yes. This one is particularly alarming. They can be incredibly charming on the surface, utterly charming, but it's a mask
A mask for what?
for what Livingston calls a profound lack of conscience. He puts it incredibly bluntly. No concept such as the rights and needs of others ever crosses their mind.
Mm,
Just doesn't register.
that's chilling.
It is. They're often impulsive, reckless, and the defining trait, a capacity for deceit. They lie easily, skillfully.
But you said they can be charming. That seems like a dangerous combination.
Extremely. Livingston suggests they can be especially attracted to people who feel their own lives are maybe a bit boring, They offer excitement. They're actors mimicking feelings they don't have.
He quotes someone else on this, right? Martha Stout.
Yes, that memorable quote. Let us take your credit card and fly to Paris tonight. Let us laugh at the rules. Let us see how fast your car can go. Let us live a little. It's that seductive pull of breaking rules.
Wow. And he mentions a statistic here, too.
Yeah, a stark one. 90% are estimated to be men. It's the thrill masking a complete disregard for anyone else.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. Patterns driven more by fear.
Right. First, the avoidant personality. These are people who are intensely socially inhibited. Why? Because they're constantly expecting to be embarrassed or humiliated. Livingston calls them rejection sensitive.
So they hold back a lot.
Shy. Very shy, often. Reluctant to take any kind of social risk unless they feel absolutely certain they'll get uncritical acceptance, which is rare. Right?
Yeah, almost impossible to guarantee.
So they end up feeling isolated, but also really needy. They often have this deep sense of inadequacy, doubting themselves constantly. And the tragic part is their intense fear of rejection often causes the very thing they fear. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
That's sad. And related to that fear maybe is the dependent personality.
Yes, there's a connection through fear, but this is more about needing to be cared for. Their primary driving need is to have someone else take care of them.
How does that look in practice?
Difficulty making simple decisions alone, needing constant reassurance, being overly self-sacrificing. Sometimes even putting up with really bad treatment just to avoid being abandoned.
They seem compliant, maybe too much so.
Very compliant, self-effacing, terrified of being alone. And the tricky dynamic Livingston points out is that this submissiveness can actually attract people who need to be in control. It sets up a really unhealthy power balance.
Okay, now patterns about control itself, the obsessive-compulsive personality style. He makes a distinction here, right?
Yes, important distinction. This isn't OCD, the anxiety disorder with specific rituals. This is a broader personality pattern. It comes from a deep fear of things being out of control, so they try to control everything, especially details.
The perfectionist, the rule follower.
Exactly. Often inflexible, quite judgmental, very attached to rules. Work often takes priority over everything. Relationships, fun. And they can be prone to depression because, well, perfection is impossible.
Right, you're always falling short.
You are. Think of that stereotype. Alphabetizing the soup cans. It's about creating order in a world that feels messy and unpredictable. Livingston notes they can be stubborn, maybe miserly, often uncomfortable with emotions, and paradoxically can struggle to get things done because they get so lost in the details.
The control actually makes them less effective.
That's the paradox, yes.
Okay, nearly through these difficult patterns. What about the depressive personality style?
This is characterized by a chronic, pervasive sense of gloominess, a deeply pessimistic outlook on everything.
Just generally unhappy.
Pretty much. Often feeling inadequate, like things are futile, blaming themselves. Livingston uses the term anhedonia, the inability to experience pleasure. He even calls them the death of any party.
Ouch.
Yeah, because their negativity can genuinely pull down the mood of everyone around them. They tend to be cynical, suspicious, always expecting the worst. And often, their expectations influence outcomes, making it seem like they were right all along.
And one last one, related perhaps. Passive-aggressive.
Yes, related in that it's about expressing negativity, but doing it indirectly. Not through open conflict, but through things like forgetting obligations, deliberately slowing down work, chronic procrastination, being generally inefficient.
So it's hostility but hidden.
Often, yes. They resist demands subtly. They might feel unappreciated or misunderstood. Livingston points out that unkept promises aren't always just forgetfulness. Sometimes it's hostility disguised as absent-mindedness. He notes it's common in kids resisting parents, but it's just not a healthy or effective way for adults to operate long-term.
Wow, okay. That's quite a tour of potentially difficult relationship dynamics. Is there a common thread Livingston sees running through many of these?
He really emphasizes self-absorption as a major theme. And linked to that, in many cases, is that lack of empathy or even conscience we talked about.
How does that feel, being around someone like that?
He says, it feels like they aren't really seeing you or listening. You feel like you exist primarily as a source for them, a source of admiration for the narcissist, someone to control for the obsessive type, maybe just comfort for the dependent one. You're an object serving their needs.
But here's the tricky part. He brings up the attraction of illusion. Why do we sometimes get drawn to people with these difficult patterns? They don't exactly sound appealing when laid out like this.
That's the crux of it, isn't it? He argues we get easily dazzled by the surface. The charm of the sociopath, the confidence of the narcissist, the beauty of the histrionic, the sheer excitement they might offer.
And we're not trained to look deeper.
Exactly. We're not taught to think in terms of these underlying character traits and what they predict about future behavior. That initial spark, that intensity, can feel like love or fate, when it might just be, as he puts it, the seductive power of illusion.
Okay, so if those are the red flags, the patterns to be wary of, let's flip it. What does Livingston say we should be looking for? What are the qualities to cherish?
This is where it gets more hopeful. He talks about cultivating these qualities in ourselves, too, using that phrase, becoming the person you long to love.
I like that. So what's top of the list?
Empathy. He calls it a primary virtue, something happiness really depends on.
That ability to see the world through someone else's eyes, right? To really get where they're coming from.
Precisely. It's reciprocal. It's fundamental for any real understanding or deep connection.
What else?
Kindness. And he defines it quite specifically, not just being superficially nice, but an absence of hidden agendas, a real willingness to listen without interrupting, and crucially not being competitive within the relationship.
That's interesting. Not competing with your partner.
Right. Kindness, for him, creates safety, trust. It allows you to be vulnerable, to be your real self, without fearing judgment or getting hurt. He contrasts this with what he calls contractual relationships, where it's all about keeping score, quid pro quo.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
True kindness, he says, actually blurs the line between giving and receiving. It feels good for both.
Okay, empathy, kindness. What about trust?
Absolutely essential. Honesty and loyalty, which boils down to, are they willing to keep their word? Do they follow through?
Seems basic, but maybe not always common.
Livingston observes that broken promises often aren't just slips of the mind. They can reflect a kind of moral relativism, where things like getting ahead, wealth, power, just become more important than being steadfast and having integrity.
And he's pretty direct about the consequences.
Very. He says you simply cannot live happily for long with people you can't fundamentally trust. He even points to some discouraging survey results about declining honesty, particularly among young people, which is worrying.
In today's world, what about tolerance?
He sees it as absolutely essential, especially as the world gets smaller and more connected. It's the opposite of thinking your group, your beliefs, have the monopoly on truth, feeling you need to convert or condemn everyone who's different.
So accepting differences.
Yes. And it's linked to being able to forgive others and yourself, letting go of grudges, holding space for different perspectives without needing them to be your perspective.
What about dealing with life's curveballs?
That brings us to flexibility. The ability to adapt, to handle change and unexpected stuff without completely losing it. It's the opposite of being rigid and impatient.
How can you spot that?
Livingston has a great point here. Watch how someone handles minor frustrations. A delayed flight, a wrong order at a restaurant. How they react tells you a lot about their underlying optimism, their tolerance, their empathy.
It makes sense. Little things reveal bigger patterns.
Exactly. And he notes the paradox. Trying to control everything through excessive planning and rigidity doesn't actually prevent problems. It just makes you less equipped to deal with them when they inevitably happen.
Intelligence comes up too, doesn't it?
It does. Not necessarily just IQ points or academic brilliance, but a certain compatibility in how you think, communicate, and what interests you.
Why is that important long term?
Because, as he points out, while attraction might spark things, you need to be able to talk to each other, share ideas, and maintain interest over decades. Significant gaps in intelligence or core interests can lead to boredom, frustration, and feeling alienated from each other.
And something maybe lighter but still important, humor.
Hugely important. He sees it as a vital defense mechanism against, well, everything. Life's absurdity, fear, even death. It's a powerful way to connect people.
Having a similar sense of humor helps.
Definitely. He argues it's a strong predictor of whether a relationship will last. And he has some specific thoughts on what makes humor work. It's often brief, taps into familiar situations, isn't afraid to tackle tough subjects, includes self-deprecation.
And isn't mean-spirited unless it's genuinely funny, not just cruel.
Right. He also makes the interesting observation that a lack of humor can be telling. Certain personality types, the obsessive, the depressed, the narcissistic, often struggle to find things funny or to laugh at themselves.
And humor takes courage.
Absolutely. Think of gallows humor. Finding lightness even in dark situations. That requires real courage.
What about how people face challenges? Optimism.
Yes, optimism. which he defines as the belief that we can actually influence our lives for the better. It's about how we react to setbacks.
Is it just something you have or don't have?
Livingston believes it can be learned and that it's contagious. He shares a really sweet story about his daughter whose little cardboard boat sank instantly.
And she just delighted in the cool water.
Yes. Yeah, that's learned optimism. And he notes it correlates strongly with success in various parts of life.
Okay, last couple of virtues. Courage and resiliency.
Crucial ones. Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about acting despite the fear, persisting even when things are uncomfortable or aren't working out immediately.
And that includes moral courage.
Yes, standing up for principles even when it's unpopular or difficult. And resiliency is tied into this. It's the ability to take life's hits, the inevitable disappointments and losses, without being utterly defeated by them.
How does this contrast with some of the negative patterns?
He contrasts it with chronic boredom, which he sees as a sign of disengagement, a lack of courage to really engage with life's challenges. He admits these qualities can be hard to spot right away, but looking at someone's track record, how they've met past commitments, can be a clue.
So it sounds like Livingston is really emphasizing that the qualities that build lasting connections are maybe less flashy than what first attracts us.
Absolutely, he makes that point very clearly. Physical beauty fades. Charm can wear thin. But these character traits, empathy, kindness, integrity, courage, humor, these are the things that wear better over the years.
But our culture pushes the surface stuff so hard.
It does. And that intense focus on appearance or initial excitement often blinds us. It distracts us from looking for these deeper, more durable qualities that actually form the foundation of a good partnership or friendship.
Okay, so we know what to look for, what to maybe avoid, but building connections is still hard, isn't it? He talks about the challenges too.
Oh, absolutely. He's very realistic. One big challenge he points to is just timing, hope, and pressure. You know, the ticking biological clock, feeling like you should be settled down, societal expectations.
And that pressure can lead to bad decisions.
It can lead to compromising, ignoring those little doubts or red flags you noticed early on. And people often go into things hoping, even believing, that the other person will change once they commit.
And Livingston says,
probably not. Those ingrained patterns we talked about, they tend to stick around. What you see is usually what you get.
Another big hurdle, really knowing someone.
It's incredibly difficult. He uses the analogy of buying a used car. Everyone presents the best version, highlighting the good stuff, maybe hiding the flaws. Everyone curates their story.
He mentions something about divorced people.
Yeah, a really striking observation from his therapy practice. How often divorced people would say they wish they could have talked to their spouse's ex-partner beforehand. It just highlights how hard it is to get the full, unvarnished truth early on.
That's sobering. And what about the people we hang out with? Our friends, our circle?
He argues they have a massive influence. He says it very directly. We are the kinds of people we are determined by, the people we choose to be around.
Wow. So our friends actually shape who we become.
To a significant degree, yes. He even brings up the famous Milgram experiment, showing how powerfully situations and the actions of those around us affect our own behavior. His takeaway: choose your friends, your partners, your colleagues very carefully. They matter immensely.
This makes him question some common ideas about relationships, doesn't it? Like marriage always being hard work.
He does challenge that, and the idea that all couples fight. He suggests it's actually possible to have relationships that have a virtual absence of criticism, conflict, struggles for control.
That sounds nice. How?
He flips the script on control.
Hmm.
Instead of needing to gain control, he suggests true security comes when you feel safe enough to give up the need for control, because you trust you're loved and accepted.
So failed relationships often lack that safety.
He observes they're often marked by lingering anger, those early misgivings that were ignored, and a dynamic where both people are focused on protecting themselves, rather than creating that shared space of safety and love.
What about the whole falling in love feeling, the honeymoon phase?
Livingston views it with a healthy dose of realism. He sees it partly as a biological chemical surge. Intense, but temporary.
The rose-tinted glasses phase.
Exactly. That initial idealization always fades. It gets replaced by the day-to-day reality of who the person actually is, shared responsibilities, sometimes just plain convenience. That initial rush isn't the relationship itself. It's just the starting pistol.
And finally, he really digs into the impact of our upbringing, our parents.
Profoundly. He argues we carry our parents, or at least the patterns we learn from them, inside us. And this deeply shapes how we connect as adults. Things like not getting unconditional love or experiencing emotional neglect, even if your material needs were met, or being subjected to harsh discipline, whether it was physical or those passive-aggressive cycles. All of this can wound our ability to form secure, trusting bonds later.
Even subtle things.
Even subtle things like the implicit idea that children somehow owe their parents can warp expectations in future relationships. Our early experiences create these templates, and we often replay them or react against them without even realizing it.
Okay, that's a lot of complexity, a lot of potential pitfalls. So amidst all that, how does Livingston suggest you actually know if a connection is right for you? Is there a key indicator?
He offers one that's remarkably simple, but incredibly powerful. He writes, the best indicator of a connection is how we feel about ourselves in their presence.
Wow, say that again. It's not how you feel about them.
No, it's about how you feel about yourself when you are with them. Do they bring out your best? Do you feel more confident, more capable, more stürmisch?
That really shifts the focus inward. He uses that movie line, right?
Yes. From as good as it gets, you make me want to be a better man. Livingston sees that as capturing it perfectly. The right people don't just shower you with affection, they actually inspire you. You feel better about yourself in their company.
Given how tricky all this is and how much people struggle, Livingston thinks we need more education on this stuff, doesn't he?
He makes a passionate case for it. Not just basic sex ed, but real, practical education about relationships, ideally starting in high school.
What kinds of courses?
He throws out ideas like barriers to happiness, or maybe how to avoid people who will break your heart, or even characteristics of a good marriage partner. Imagine learning that proactively.
What would be covered?
Things like, what is happiness, really? What does love look like in practice? How do you actually recognize potentially suitable or unsuitable people before you're deeply invested? How do you handle conflict well? How do you cope with the big stuff? Loss, mortality, the role of intimacy beyond just sex.
That sounds way more useful than the usual advice kids get.
Right. He contrasts it with typical parental advice, which he says is often fear-based, and focuses mainly on restrictions, don't do this, don't go there, rather than building skills and understanding.
How would you make these courses engaging?
He suggests bringing in real people, guest speakers, couples who've been together a long time, people who've been through divorce, people facing serious illness who have perspective, people with different belief systems. Use their stories. And use films, books, things that spark real discussion.
And woven through all this is that idea of hope, of optimism.
Yes, that core belief that optimism isn't just luck. It can be learned. It's contagious. And it's absolutely vital for resilience in life and in relationships.
So wrapping it up, Livingston isn't saying find the objectively perfect person because they don't exist.
Exactly. It's about finding people who are, as he puts it, perfect for us. People who make us feel safe.
Yeah.
Who are tolerant, kind, brave in their own ways. People where that line between giving and receiving just blurs because hurting them feels unthinkable.
This has been a really insightful deep dive into Gordon Livingston's How to Love. A lot to think about. Recognizing those difficult patterns, yes, but also really focusing on cultivating and looking for those core virtues: empathy, kindness, honesty, resilience, humor.
And understanding the real challenges, moving beyond just the fairy tale romance idea.
Absolutely. We hope this gives you, our listeners, some useful frameworks, maybe helps you look a bit more closely at the patterns in yourself and others, and focus on building connections based on that solid ground of respect, safety, and shared values. And for final thought, Livingston observes something really interesting. He notes how most people start relationships, especially marriage, with this incredibly optimistic, happily ever after expectation.
Right, the fairy tale ending.
But then he hits you with this. In life, we get not what we deserve, but what we expect. And he points out that often relationships don't fail because people didn't try hard enough. They fail because of the inconvenient fact they no longer loved each other. Sometimes they even grew to dislike each other.
A harsh reality check.
It really is. And maybe the most provocative thing is that the gap between our initial soaring, optimistic expectations and the sometimes difficult, even painful reality that unfolds. What does that gap tell us about our choices, about the expectations we bring, and maybe ultimately about ourselves? So the question for you is, what do you truly expect from the connections in your life?